I love to ask the question, how do you think your money is currently allocated? And then wait for some feedback. And at the end of the day, most people are so far off from what their actual risk tolerance is. Welcome back to Invested in You, brought to you by Community First Investment Group. We're here to help you take the next step in your financial journey, no matter where you're starting from. I'm your host, Nate Hastow. If you've been following along, you know that each episode we break down an investment topic. We help to build confidence and move you forward to your next step. Today we're looking at financial planning, what it means, the key components of a strong plan, and why having a roadmap can make all the difference between feeling overwhelmed or empowered. I'm just going to start with the definitions here. What is financial planning? And financial planning at its core is a comprehensive ongoing process that helps us achieve our financial goals. If you listened to our last episode, we talked about retirement planning, which is actually an aspect of financial planning. Financial planning is that broad view, not exclusive to retirement planning. When we look at what financial planning covers, it could be things like budgeting, saving, debt management, reviewing insurances, retirement, which we talked about in the last episode, taxes, and estate planning. The importance of having a plan versus winging it can be massive. One of my favorite authors, actually, James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, has one of my favorite quotes, I think, that really refers to why having a plan is so important. And this really comes down to, he says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And that truly is what having a financial plan is all about. You want to have a good understanding of what am I trying to accomplish here? How can I, in some ways, automate those good decisions over and over again? And how do I make sure that it's consistently being updated to match the evolution of my finances, of my goals, of my family, all those kinds of things. So when we break down what is financial planning, there are several key facets here. First is cash flow management. The way that I've always thought about this is if you don't understand your cash flow, you don't really have a chance of having an effective financial plan. This is all of the inflows and understanding where your fixed outflows may be going. So inflows could be things like your income. They could be things like if you have like side jobs or other things that you tend to do. You want to make sure you've got your budget in order so that you understand how much needs to go out on a regular basis. For a lot of folks, they don't like the practice of writing out a budget. And I think it's a good place to start if you've never really considered where is my money going. But I don't know that it's a super sustainable habit for the vast majority of the population. Maybe excluding the folks who have a tilt towards accounting and just love to work on the numbers every single weekend, and that's their hobby. So kudos to you. That's awesome. It doesn't work for most of us, but it absolutely works for those types of folks. Spending habits is probably the biggest thing to key in on. So in the beginning, as you are writing out and understanding where your money is going, it's good to try and figure out if there are trends. If you find that you're spending most of your dollars on a debit or a credit card, I always said if you don't want to write all these things out, at least do a review at the end of each month as you make your credit card or you're reviewing your debit statements. Make sure you understand what that money's doing. If you go on that credit card statement, you find, I don't even remember what this is, or that wasn't what I thought it was, or I can't believe I spent that much on this, and you find that's a consistent theme, that's probably an area that you want to refocus on overall. And potentially figure out ways to use those dollars in a different way, potentially automatically. We'll get into that in a few minutes here. Making sure that you have a solid emergency fund established is probably another major factor that I see people miss on when it comes to cash flow management. Emergencies do happen, and they're going to happen. The problem is we don't know when they're going to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't be emergencies. It would be something you could plan for. So having an emergency fund is a little bit of a catch-all here, but this could be things like you get a flat tire. I do want to clarify, this is not money that necessarily is used for getting a new set of tires that you were aware were wearing out, right? This is a flat tire, something that's kind of an emergent scenario. Ideally, in a perfect world, an emergency fund should be about 3 to 6 months of your fixed expenses, not necessarily all of your income for 3 to 6 months, but in order to know what your fixed expenses are for 3 to 6 months, a budget is a great place to start. But this is an important piece of cash flow management. The second facet of financial planning is debt management. When it comes to debt management, this tends to be more of a fixed outflow perspective. Sometimes this can be variable, but for the most part, it's usually a fixed number. There's this concept out there about good and bad debt, as well as different ways to pay debt off more efficiently. I guess I'll just walk through what we tend to look at when we're gathering information to work with someone on a financial plan and they have debt that they'd like to work through. And step one for us is to create a debt benchmark. So we're going through and we're kind of itemizing all the different types of debt that they have, good debt, bad debt. And then we're taking a look at how their credit score stacks up to what they're paying from a going interest rate perspective. For us, we want to make sure that they're not overpaying on certain types of debts that perhaps they got a year or two ago and they've improved their credit score since then. Oftentimes the credit score may not be fantastic if there's a lot of debt hanging around. But at the end of the day, that's something as we work some of this debt off with a strategic plan, they may find that their credit score starts to rise and we could look at refinancing or repurposing or consolidating some of that debt to pay it off in a more efficient way and pay less in interest. Third facet is investment planning. This really involves aligning investments to an individual's goals and timelines. I'm not going to go into a ton of depth there. We're going to cover that in more depth in a future episode. Risk management is a key facet of this as well. For many people, this is an area that they're going to overlook. Admittedly, it's not a super fun piece to go through, especially on your own. When you work with a professional, you can be a little bit more unbiased on this. For us, this could include things like looking at life insurance policies, disability policies, health insurance. From a life insurance perspective, and we'll go more into depth on that in a future episode, we're really trying to protect an individual or a family from catastrophic loss. Disability insurance policies are looking to cover an individual or a family in the case of loss of income. And health insurance, if we're going along those same lines, is making sure that people are protected from just loss of function, their ability to do things and stay healthy. Facet 5 here is tax planning. Really for us, we're looking for ways to make sure that people are being efficient in the way that they pay their taxes, looking for ways that they may be able to gather deductions. At the end of the day, you can't avoid taxes legally, so we always tell people, pay your taxes. It's not really worth getting into trouble with the tax man or the IRS, but at the end of the day, there are legal ways that you can go about managing these aspects. Retirement planning, we just had a whole episode on that, so I'm not going to go into more depth on this episode. So if you missed it, go check out the last episode on retirement planning. And lastly is estate planning. So this is planning for when you can no longer actively direct your funds or your money in the future. When we take a look at why financial planning is so personal, it comes down to the difference that exists for every single individual. I don't recall a single scenario at this point in my career that we've done an identical portfolio or solution or plan for anyone. There are many things that are similar because there are strategies that work well, but you need to kind of vet that when you're working with each individual. So for us, as I mentioned, no two plans are the same. What we really try and align is making sure that the plans match goals, value or lifestyle, family needs, and importantly, risk tolerance as well. As I mentioned, I believe in the last episode, financial plans truly are living documents. They do need consistent updating and adjustments. Things that could cause us to need to make some major adjustments could be things like maybe an individual got married, perhaps they had their first child or another child, they might have had job or career changes, they might have had to move, they may have experienced large shifts in the market. Now, what I will say from a market shift perspective, there are times that may prompt us to make some changes in their plan, but typically a change in the stock market is not something that's going to cause us to revamp an entire financial plan. So when it comes down to that, that's a little bit more of an investment management question than a financial planning question. For us, when we look at how an advisor can make a big difference in all of these roles, um, to be totally blunt, most people are not in a position where they have enough time on their hands to create a full-fledged financial plan. And if they do have the time, it's likely that they don't have the expertise in understanding all of the trends and pieces that they need to consider. An example that always comes to mind when I think about how a financial advisor can help people stay on track with a financial plan is a couple I worked with in their early to mid 50s. They were a little bit behind on retirement savings, had some debt that they were trying to work through. And this was, if you can think back, right before COVID started, that we started working together. COVID happened, the market dropped rapidly, and thinking back to the time that we had spent educating them about the philosophies of buy low, sell high, they gave me a call and said, Nate, we're looking at the market right now, and didn't you say it's good to buy when the market's low and sell when the market's high? I did say that. Now, out of context, they may have taken their entire emergency fund and dumped it into the market at that point. Now, if you remember what happened during COVID, you'll remember the market rebounded rapidly. However, the only place that they would have been investing this money would have been in their retirement accounts, and they weren't yet in an age where they could take that money out easily without any sorts of penalties or taxes. And good thing they didn't, because my recommendation to them was, hey, we don't have a large enough emergency fund for you to put all of your emergency fund that we have into your retirement accounts. And what if something happens that we weren't expecting? They said, okay, well, that's too bad a little bit, but we understand. Well, very shortly after that, it was no more than 2 to 3 weeks, he ended up getting laid off from his job, and they needed cash to make sure that the ends were meeting. So this is not an I told you so moment, but this is certainly one of those moments where you consider the bigger picture with a financial plan and determine what risks are we willing to take and what risks aren't we willing to take. The truth is, would they have made money investing at that point? Probably. Would they have given a lot of it back with taxes and penalties and taking the money out because this individual lost their job shortly after? Also, yes. Great chance they might have ended up totally net zero on that scenario. But at the end of the day, they had easy access to their money to make sure that they could keep everything afloat until his job picked back up. So at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons why an advisor and a financial plan can make such a big difference for people. Obviously, their experience isn't necessarily representative of everyone's experience moving forward, but it's a simple example to consider when you discuss making a potential large move, or really any major money move, with your advisor, especially if you have a game plan in place. Transitioning into our Q&A session for this episode, today's question is, how do I know if my investments match my actual goals? And this is an interesting question. This is probably one of my favorite topics recently to cover with folks, especially people who are bringing money in from maybe an old employer or an account that they have been managing themselves or with a different advisor. Oftentimes, they're frustrated with either how much volatility they're experiencing in their account or even a lack of growth that they might be perceiving in the account as overall. The first thing that we do when we're looking at an account is we're taking a look at how it's invested, how it's all broken down, how it's allocated, and spending some time with the individual to go through a risk profile questionnaire, understanding what level of risk they're actually comfortable with. Oftentimes this is a range, it may not be an exact number, but for us, we're able to go through that process with our clients, help them make a selection that makes sense for them. And then I love to ask the question, how do you think your money is currently allocated? And then wait for some feedback. And at the end of the day, most people are so far off from what their actual risk tolerance is that it's almost become a running joke a little bit. So when it comes down to, do my investments match my actual goals? The easiest way to figure that out is to spend some time really understanding your risk tolerance. So that's a key piece there, and hopefully that makes some sense. But for us, when we're looking at that from a financial planning perspective, it's not just how much risk are you willing to accept, it's also what is your time horizon that you're working with, what number do we need to be able to hit to actually achieve your financial goals? And it's a blend of all of those things together. Oftentimes, if someone is more risk averse than their current portfolio allocation, we can give them some alternatives to consider that aren't, you need to stay this risky and hope and pray. So at the end of the day, I think it's a super important conversation to have, and that's how I would go about figuring out if your current investment allocation matches your goals. Part risk tolerance, part financial plan. I want to thank you guys for joining us today on this episode of Invested in You, brought to you by Community First Investment Group. Here for your now, here for your future. We hope today's episode helped simplify financial planning for you. And if so, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you're ready to build your personal financial plan or just have a few questions, visit us at cfigadvisors.com to connect with me or our team. We will see you 2 weeks from now for our next episode, which is on investment mistakes to avoid. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Securities and advisory services are offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance products are offered through LPL or its licensed affiliates. Community First Bank and Community First Investment Group are not registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor. Registered representatives of LPL offer products and services using Community First Investment Group and may also be employees of Community First Bank. These products and services are being offered through LPL or its affiliates, which are separate entities from and not affiliates of Community First Bank or Community First Investment Group. Securities and insurance offered through LPL or its affiliates are not FDIC insured by FDIC or any other government agency, not bank guaranteed, not bank deposits or obligations, may lose value. There is no assurance that techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of these strategies. Investments involve risk, include possible loss of principal. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional.